I'm really concerned about the recent homicides that we've had, of course, and our hearts go out to everybody who's been affected. We have had a bad 3 months in terms of homicides, and as you know, in the last week, just 5 on my mind, in which very young people have been affected, and that's a horrible, horrible thing. Overall, of course, people talk about New York because it used to be so crime-ridden, and it has come down. Whether for the rest of this year, London and New York are in similar sort of places, we will see. This has been a particularly bad couple of months for London and a particularly good couple of months for New York.
But, I mean, it's really put you in the international spotlight. I've been looking at some of the coverage internationally, and, OK, a bit of hyperbole, I'm sure there, but they've picked up on that, and they've got the Commissioner now presiding over a murder rate that's worse than New York's. I mean, that could be your legacy.
Well, I'm hoping to be here for 5 years. It wouldn't be something they could have said 3 months ago, and I'm definitely determined that it won't be what they'll be able to say in a few months' time. I speak to the New York Commissioner a lot. He's been over here, I've been over there. There's things we can learn from each other. If you compared us with, say, Baltimore or some other cities, 10 times, 20 times, 50 times the homicide rate, I need to learn from the rest of the world, but I need to concentrate on London, and that's what we're doing. We've got 300 officers a day extra out over this weekend. We will be using every tactic we know in the coming weeks and months to bear down on knife crime and to reduce the number of homicides.
Interesting what you say about that extra deployment then. Is that a sign that you accept this is a crisis? Because I was reading some former officers, of course your serving officers can't speak, but the former officers clearly in touch with the serving officers, they say it's a crisis.
I would not use the word crisis. All I would say is let's focus on the fact that a number of people have tragically lost their lives in the last few days and indeed in the last month, and we need to reduce the number, particularly the number of young people who are dying in street attacks where often ferocious violence used by other young people in groups, usually, not quite always, associated with street drug dealing. This is a very particular problem which has sort of caused the rate of homicide to rise. That's the problem we need to deal with. The police can't do that alone. We need help from government, local government, other agencies, and most particularly from the public.
You'll be aware of the Glasgow experience with a pretty high murder rate a decade or so ago, and talking to their violence reduction unit, which I'm sure you know an awful lot about. Talking about that, you treat it as a disease, and therefore you involve all agencies. Do you feel a bit overexposed on this, that people are regarding it simply as a policing problem?
I don't feel that I or the Met are overexposed. I do think it is a long-term problem which requires concerted long-term effort. Glasgow had a 10-year strategy, and as you say, they involved everybody. The police have a very important role, and we are doing that. We're taking weapons off the streets, we'll be doing that even more. We're stopping and searching people, we'll be doing that even more. We're targeting the most violent people, we'll be doing that even more. And we will be trying to divert young people away from crime through our schools officers, our partnership officers, and we'll be trying to take our communities with us.
Have you met any of the victims' families?
Yes, I have. Over the last few months, I've met many, many victims' families. And I have also met officers who have tried to save victims' lives, and officers, of course, who have saved victims' lives. And I have met all kinds of people who've been very badly affected by knife crime. So I see that as part of my job.
And this is driving you on. Let me talk about some specific measures, and you'd be aware people are talking a lot about stop and search, and you talk about it being a valuable tool, but of course you remember Theresa May's Home Secretary asking the police not to do so much of it. But numbers under you, number of stop and searches, have actually fallen. There were, what, about 70,000 in the last 6 months of 2016 and 66,000 or so in the last 6 months of 2017.
Weapons searches have increased, weapons seizures have increased. That's what I'm really focusing on. I anticipate they will continue to increase.
And while we're on the issue of statistics, what about just the plain numbers, officers on the streets? They have fallen, and the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, is saying they may even drop below 30,000, down to 27,500 in 2 or 3 years' time.
So I am concerned, of course, always, 24 hours a day, how many officers do we have available on the streets? We don't solve problems like knife crime just through visible officers on the streets, also through fantastic covert work. You'll be aware of our Trident teams, for example, who've been targeting gangsters, taking hundreds of them off the streets. seizing nearly 1,000 weapons, but also through our clever analysts and through other methods as well. So police officers is a very important thing to have, and visible police officers very important as well in the fight against knife crime. The Mayor has been able to find us another £112 million. I'm investing that entirely in the fight against knife crime, in people and a bit in equipment. Of course, I would always want more people, and I've inherited less than my predecessor started with, that is for sure. But it's also my job to prioritise and to make sure that we have the right people in the right places, targeting the most violent people and providing reassurance, and that's what we'll be doing.
But just reading into how you put that, obviously very diplomatic about the numbers, but you would always like more people, presumably therefore not fewer, as is the prediction, as I say, from the Mayor. Are you at rock bottom now, around about the 30,000 level?
An awful lot of things can happen. I can't predict what will happen with our funding. It's my job to make an evidence-based case. I did that in the autumn. We have another 112 million, which we are now going to be investing in the fight against knife crime. It's my job to look at what the evidence is and to argue for more. And I will be doing that if I feel that we cannot get on top of this problem.
And Commissioner, can you make a prediction that in another year's time you'll be able to sit in front of the cameras and tell us that we are getting on top of this issue?
If we take the example of scooter-enabled crime, that had been going up like this in the 2 years before I arrived. 3 months in to my commissionership, we started a whole range of new tactics, and we put even more effort into that. And you'll be aware that quite a fair amount of that involves robbery and sometimes involves knives and weapons as well. That is now coming right down. I want to see the same with knife crime. I hope we will see the same with knife crime. I do not believe the police can do that by themselves, and I need others to get involved, and I need the public to help us.
And lastly, Commissioner, a question about, not on this subject, a question about Salisbury, because of course the Metropolitan Police in charge of the investigation into what happened to the Skripals. What can you tell us about the state of that investigation? And for instance, have you even identified any potential suspects yet?
So I'm not going to give you an update on the investigation. I will leave that to the investigation leads and to Neil Basu. What I will say is it's a very complex investigation. It will obviously be a very long-running investigation. It's great news to hear that one of the people who was attacked is in so much better health. And you know, our thoughts are with Mr. Skripal. We will continue doing our job. We will be therefore seeking to establish exactly what's happened and bringing somebody or some people to justice if we possibly can. And we will be working with the government and with the agencies as we do that, of course.
But it's going to take an awfully long time.
It will be a long and complex investigation, yes.